Hello everyone, and welcome once again to a teardown of a hard drive most of you have probably never seen. Now this is a Hitachi 15,000 RPM 450 gigabyte disk drive from an IBM NetApp server. Bought this allegedly new old stock on eBay, and it even came with the drive cage, and they line up pretty well in date. The drive caddy is labeled August 2010, and the drive itself is labeled 3rd of November 2010. However, I don't think this drive is actually new, because see these little scratches on it? And they are really in these lines up here and down near the base, and that happens when you're sliding these drives in and out of servers, because there's very little clearance above the drive, and metal on servers isn't particularly, servers aren't built for user comfort, so the metal on them is usually pretty rough and sharp. So basically, sliding the drives in and out, sometimes the metal on the lid gets scraped. So all that said, this drive has definitely been used before, and it also doesn't work. So I got a refund, and I don't have to send the drive back because it would cost more to ship it back than what I paid for it, because I live literally in the middle of nowhere and postage is expensive. But that does mean that we get to take a look inside. Before that though, let's take a look at the back, as it holds a few surprises that you don't usually see. As with every 15K drive I've seen, this is an SAS disk. And that's, of course, typical of server drives. But what isn't is 2 cache chips. And this is done to widen the memory bus from 64 to 128 bits for faster data throughput. Or at least that is my assumption. It could also be done for parity. Like, for example, if one chip fails, the other takes over. Or the data in both chips, like they could run simultaneously, and it's for an ECC sort of thing. So there are a few different possibilities, but I think wider memory bus is the most likely, since each one seems to have its own separate traces. It looks like the big ribbon connector for the heads is actually all the way up here, and it's odd that it would be all the way up there, but I can't think of what else would have that many pins on a hard drive. Here's our primary controller, here's our motor controller, and here's our secondary controller for if this one breaks. Now here is our BIOS chip for the hard drive, basically, that's the firmware, or at least the loader of the firmware, and it's a much larger chip than usual, and it's actually made by Winbond. As we can see on the back here, the platters only occupy a very small portion of the drive compared to your standard 3.5-inch hard drive. There you go, you can see that a bit better. And that's to minimize air resistance, because air resistance, even on a tiny glass disc or metal disc, starts to matter quite a lot when you're going 15,000 rotations a minute. But anyway, without any further ado, let's open her up. It really is a shame that this drive did not work, and I will be looking to purchase a replacement. Sorry, these screws are incredibly tight and they are very difficult to get out, so I do have to take them off camera so I can apply a bit more torque. Well, that was really cool. I put it in the freezer for a few minutes, which was okay because it was already dead. The screws, these 3, just were not coming out, and I was thinking, because metal contracts when it gets cold, that would actually make them come out a lot easier. And it sure did. They come out so smooth now. So I actually, I'm going to keep that technique in my book for future work. Let's see, it looks like there's one more here, and a bunch more hidden somethings that will either be filters or more screws. Once we get it open, if I see fit, I can bring out that old Seagate Cheetah that we disassembled a little while ago, and we can compare. Hitachi does have a reputation for building incredibly reliable drives, and I have recommended them many a time because their drives just refuse to die 98% of the time. It's a reminder that everything can fail. There is a potential for something to go wrong. Oh yeah, I haven't even said what's wrong with this drive. So it just won't spin up. Well, it spins up and it beeps at me. So that means usually that the heads are stuck and they can't move. So there actually is a chance of fixing this drive, but I'm not all that confident that I can. Okay, that's just a bump in the lid. I don't think there are screws under there. That's it. Here we go, and boom. Wow, those platters are tiny. So yes, it's parked off platter, and indeed, the head connector is all the way up here. That is amazing. So we have one huge filter here, a laptop drive sized filter on the inside of the lid. Why is there an ant on my floor? And yeah, wow. So how many platters do we have? This is a 450 gigabyte drive, and we have 1, 2, 3 platters. So each platter holds 150 gigabytes, so that's 75 gigabytes per side. And on that density, this is a drive that I can keep open for a little bit and look at and still have a chance of fixing. These heads are tiny. Oh, I missed the huge filter at the bottom here. That's very, very interesting. So let me bring in a different drive for comparison. Okay, in your typical consumer hard drive, the filters are located directly off of the platter. Air exits the platter area, passes through the filter, perhaps passes through another filter and comes back into the platter area. And that even holds true for the Seagate. Although, now that I'm looking, no, it also takes a circuitous route. Okay, that's so fascinating. Both of these server drives here, the filters aren't directly off the platter. The Seagate passes it through a filter immediately off the platter. Then the airflow pattern goes all the way around the perimeter of the drive into this other filter here, as does the Hitachi. The air goes through here all the way down this channel and passes through this filter. Then on the other side, air can also come down this way and go through the filter, and it can also go straight off the platter through this filter and back up. So either of those three, or more likely a combination of the two, is in use. I don't understand why, and I'm not going to pretend to understand why. That sort of engineering is way above my knowledge, but I think that is absolutely fascinating. Let's go plug it into the SAS drive bay, shall we? My computer is already very loud on its own. I apologize for just how loud it is. You might not even be able to hear the drive over the racket this thing makes. But here goes. Heard a little beep. So there's the beep, and I heard data being read from the platters. All the other drives on the SAS controller just blinked, so that means that it's being initialized by the SAS controller. However, if I go in Windows and I try to format it, or use a disk utility to run a benchmark, it doesn't initialize and I get an I/O error. So it works to some extent, and I could see if this had been pulled out of a server, if someone just plugged it into a computer and saw if it showed up in Device Manager, they would assume the drive is working. However, if you actually tried to do anything with it, it would quickly reveal that this drive is not working, aka broken. They look pretty similar, the Seagate and the Hitachi, although the Seagate Cheetah does have more filters. Interesting. So the platters are more recessed in the Hitachi, and the Seagate definitely has larger filters for external air intake, and the Hitachi has this funky design that goes all the way around the periphery of the drive for whatever reason. I don't know why I haven't pointed out the obvious difference yet. Seagate Cheetah parks the heads on the platter through landing zones, and normally it would land up here near the inner ring of the platter if the drive wasn't broken, and the Hitachi parks them off the platter with load ramps. So that is the most obvious difference between these drives, but I mean, just looking at them like this, open with no context, you may very well think that they are different revisions of like the same series drive. Like that this might be a slightly earlier Seagate Cheetah or something, because they are very similar. And I'm not saying one copied the other, I'm just saying that when a good way to build something is found, manufacturers in the server market don't screw around with trying to do other things. Yes, clearly they try to make their own innovations, but you know, one of these manufacturers, actually no, it was Seagate. They invented the 15K drive in like 2001. So Seagate made the Cheetah, and then Hitachi was like, okay, that works great. Let's just use the best elements of that design. So that's probably what led to them looking so similar, using the same airflow pattern, having the same cutout shape in the case. Now I have a true relic for all of you here. This, what I'm about to show you, is a high-end 10,000 RPM drive from before Hitachi even purchased IBM's hard drive division, and before 15,000 was even an RPM on the market. This is a 10,000 RPM 9.1 gigabyte SCSI drive from IBM. This was manufactured by IBM in 1998, and the website listed on the sticker is HTTP. It's not even HTTPS. And of course, this is pre-SAS, so it uses SAS 0.5, which is 68-pin SCSI. Unfortunately, 68-pin is not hot swappable, but there are some revisions of this drive that actually have a controller board with 80-pin SCSI, which is hot swappable because of its power connector configuration. I've talked about this drive on the channel before. Go check out that video if you're interested. But I've actually never taken the controller board off. And if I do that on this drive, I don't want to be too destructive since this works and it's a lovely drive. But if I take the controller board off, through the metal on the bottom, I should be able to see the size of the platters. So I guess we could determine through this drive once and for all if the Hitachi is actually a copy of the Seagate, so to speak, because if Hitachi was still using IBM's original design 12 years after this drive, or at least a revision, it would resemble this one a lot more closely. And clearly, there's not that close of a resemblance between these drives. From what I understand, Hitachi did significantly overhaul IBM's drive manufacturing practices upon purchasing the company. But let's just see what we've got here. Oh wow, that uses almost full-size platters. So from the size of the motor spindle and the edges of the platters, it appears as if it does use full-size 3.5-inch platters. Okay, that is crazy. So, there's a reason that, oh god, this one had a huge head crash. What is this from? Probably a Seagate. But anyway, there's a reason that 3.5-inch platters haven't been used in 10,000 RPM drives, hello me, for quite a while, and that's because they generate more air resistance than these tiny little guys that are indeed quite a lot smaller. But I suppose the reason they used to be used, other than no one had thought to make them smaller yet, is because, I mean, this drive is only 9.1 gigabytes, which even for 1998 wasn't all that big. So a bigger platter can store more data, so it would make sense that they used to have to be a good bit larger. But yes, that does confirm it. It looks like Hitachi may have read Seagate's homework a little bit and not copied it, but definitely taken some design elements, because it's so far different than this IBM drive from 12 years earlier that there's no way that this led to this. Instead, as I've stated several times now, Seagate did invent the 15,000 RPM drive with the first Cheetah around 2000, I believe, and Hitachi looked at a high RPM server drive that sold well and was working well. And I mean, it's just natural. When something is the first to market and is really successful, you try to copy it to replicate their success, and HGST was very much able to replicate their success by building their own iteration on the same basic design. So these are really cool drives to see inside of for these two, and on bottom of for this one. And I guess that was an interesting dive into the history of the drives that I didn't even envision myself going down that rabbit hole when I started. Oh wait, I have a better comparison. This is a 73 gigabyte, also covered on the channel, 15,000 RPM Ultrastar that I bought just because it looked goofy as hell. It's got that weird lid shape, and that is very much taken after the original Seagate Cheetah, which also did not have a lid which covered the whole drive. But we can see that underneath these are basically the same drive. The platters are here, the filter intakes are even in the exact same place, and that screw, these two screws, in fact, are in the same place on both drives. So it looks like they didn't change their design much from 2007 to 2010, only just making the lid a bit more full coverage, so to speak. But yeah, with that, I'm gonna wrap up this video. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope this was enjoyable, informative, or many other adjectives you could insert here. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me for the next episode. But for now, that's it.